What is something that was normal in medieval times, but would be weird today? This was a love potion recipe from the 10th century. A woman will lay a cloth on the ground and cover it in grain. She will then strip her clothing off and cover her body in honey. After that, she will roll around on the cloth and try to get covered in grain. Afterwards, she will get up and take the grain stuck to her body over to the mill and ground that into flour. She will then use that flour to bake bread and give it to her husband to eat. There was also another love potion that involves a wife presenting her naked, but to her husband, who then rolls bread dough on it that will be turned into bread. In modern times, love potions still exist in the form of cam girls selling their bathwater to gamers. That's true, but I think the bathwater is cleaner than the 2 potions of the medieval times. So much cleaner that it's literally just pure tap water, I think. At least, I might be wrong, but I think I remember somebody on 4chan, of course it's 4chan, buying Belle Delphine's bathwater and paying to have it analyzed in a lab. And the results apparently were that it was just pure tap water with no signs of human skin cells or skin oils or anything else you might expect in used bath water. Again, I have no sources and my memory could be completely wrong, but I really hope it's true, because the idea of Belle Delphine scamming horny neckbirds by selling them $30 jars of tap water just tickles me pink. Donating your urine to a dyer. Wearing a codpiece. Duels over a bride at a wedding. That leads to my favorite trivia of weddings, where the best man was not necessarily your best mate, but the best duelist you knew, in order to help fight over the bride at a wedding. And the reason they stand on the side they do has to do with positioning and having a sword to hand, I think. Also, the reason for bridesmaids and groomsmen is to act as body doubles for the bride and groom and confuse any evil spirits looking to do them harm, in addition to mundane duties. So bridesmaids and groomsmen are supposed to be your expendable friends/family members. Oh, looks like the spirits got Sarah. Well, we never did have much hope for her, nor did she have any prospects for a potential sweeter. Apostrophe. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single spirit in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. A barber doing surgery. It was more like a surgeon was also doing haircuts. Just imagine a barber giving you the sickest fade while you get a radical prostatectomy, or giving you a bob while performing a hysterectomy. It's like a great 2-for-1 deal. Animal courts. By far the most serial offenders were pigs, accused and convicted of chewing off body parts and even eating children. Most were found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging or being burned at the stake. In 1386, a convicted pig was dressed in a waistcoat, gloves, drawers and a human mask for its execution. In 1386, a convicted pig was dressed in a waistcoat, gloves, drawers and a human mask for its execution. That is some peak fed up 14th century S right there. That's the kind of S that made Barbara Tuchman pour a tall drink and oil her typewriter. There was a pope in 897 who hated his predecessor so much he had his dead body taken from its grave and put to trial, just so he could talk S about him in front of everyone. The history of the church is honestly a great read for people interested. There's some frankly bizarre stuff going on there. Outlawry, which stripped a person of all legal rights and allowed anyone to kill them with impunity. Civil death is the modern version of this, and it's still practiced in Rhode Island. I guess I'll add that civil death in Rhode Island includes the loss of ability to possess or bequeath property, get married, or even to bring a claim in court. Civilly dead, attacked or molested in prison have no capacity to sue. Because they are dead, it is not clear whether a defendant could legally be convicted for murder of a person already legally dead, and there's no case law to that effect, so it would have to be decided by the court. The Supreme Court has upheld the statute's bar on bringing claims in court several times in recent years, despite Re's constitution featuring a provision absent from the US Constitution, which protects the right to bring claims in court. In case anyone is interested, this is the definition of civil death as per the RICLU. The law, enacted in 1909, declares people sentenced to life imprisonment to be dead for virtually all legal purposes, including those relating to matrimony and holding property. even though most are eligible for parole after 20 years. Apostrophe. When's the last time it was used? The royal wiper. Seriously. Someone would wipe the king's and it was a respected position. Going to sleep as soon as it gets dark. Waking up and hanging out with your family for a few hours in the middle of the night. And going back to bed until sunrise. I would like to know more. Before the Industrial Revolution, sleeping habits were different. It changed because of street lights, working hours and such modern things, into a single 8-hour cycle. But in earlier times, you would go to bed at sundown, sleep 4 to 5 hours, wake up and maybe F your spouse, or go shoot the S with your neighbor for a couple hours. Things that didn't require light. Then go back to sleep for 3 to 4 more hours. There is some speculation that this sleeping pattern is more natural, and that this may have something to do with why some people have problems with insomnia. Note the speculation. Before alarm clocks were commonplace, the factor is used to employ people to walk up and down the streets knocking on the windows of the shift workers to wake them up. They used a long pole with some wire on the end. Sleeping with your entire family in one bed, or if you are a king, sleeping in the same bed with a rival king to cement your friendship and respect for each other as brothers. Privacy was just not really a thing in the Middle Ages. Edit. I came at this with a pretty Western perspective obviously. Many families around the world still sleep together in the same bed/space. However, in modern Western culture, it isn't considered as normal as it would have been in previous centuries. Actually, it wasn't a thing for the majority of history. Only relatively recently, the last 150 years or so, with separate bedrooms. Fight instead of divorce. Why waste time on courts and child support? In medieval Germany, if a husband and wife reached a dead end on some important issue, they entered the ring. The rules, of course, equalized the forces of men and women. In the ring, the man was in a hole. One hand was tied behind his back, so that he could strike with only one hand, and the wife was given a bag of coal, with which she struck. Whoever wins the fight inflicts serious injury, or the defeated one asks for mercy. It's, therefore, right in the dispute. In 1228, a woman fought a man at Bern, Switzerland, and soundly defeated him. German law provided that in such a case the man should be armed with 3 wooden clubs. He was to put B sick up to his waist in a 3-foot wide hole dug in the ground, with one hand tied behind his back. The woman was to be armed with 3 rocks, each weighing between 1 and 5 pounds, and each one wrapped in cloth. The man could not leave his hole, but the woman was free to run around the edge of the pit. If the man touched the edge of the pit with either his hand or arm, he had to surrender one of his clubs to the judges. If the woman hit him with a rock while he was doing so, she forfeited one of her stones. Bizarre as it may seem to us today, this marital duel was very far from play acting. For both parties, the penalty for defeat was death. If the woman won, the man was executed. If the man won, the woman was buried alive. Gives people a whole lot more incentive to sort out their grievances in private. You have insulted my honor. I challenge you to a duel. I accept. Pies at 10 paces. Brushing your teeth with a stick. A toothbrush is just a stick with bristles at one end. A lot of people believe that medieval people had bad teeth. This might be because of movie interpretations. Truth is, their teeth weren't rotten because back then, they didn't eat that much sugar as we do nowadays. There is a book in my local museum with an absolutely brutal traveler's description of a queen. Can't remember which one lol, which basically says her teeth are all black and falling out because she is both gluttonous and rich enough to afford imported sugar and fruits. Although I can't see that being much of a problem for the common folks. Probably Elizabeth, not medieval. The arrival of sugar into Elizabethan society saw lower class people blacken their teeth with charcoal to get that upper class rotten teeth look. Inheriting clothes being a big deal. Things weren't really disposable back then. People wore, turned, refreshed, resewed, cut down and resewed, stripped into trimming, and then into rags every piece of clothing they owned. There was a thriving second-hand market, and a lot of money in carefully reusing good bits of cloth, cutting off worn-out buttonholes and resewing garments, reusing trim, etc. Even the upper class did this to an extent. You had to get to ridiculously wealthy royalty level for clothing to be abundant and completely new all the time. You rarely find whole garments in archaeological digs, but you find all sorts of bits and pieces that were cut off an otherwise whole garment. This was because making cloth was insanely time consuming, especially in the earlier periods when the primary looms were upright and sheep weren't yet fully modernized and produced smaller amounts of wool of various qualities. Linen was even more time consuming. Cotton wasn't a thing yet, and cotton is seriously annoying to process by hand. And silk was out of reach for most people. So, people willed cloth to relatives when they died, as well as specific garments. These days you sell off all grandma's old Walmart clothes, or sometimes get some cool vintage stuff you wear occasionally. But back then getting a few ells of worsted wool cloth was a huge score. There are garments that were passed down several times because they were just that valuable, and clothes show up in the wills of people from many different classes. It was entirely normal for your daughter to be wearing a dress made from her great-grandmother's old overgown that had been willed down through the family and the good cloth repurposed until it was only fit for rags. There were whole industries devoted to refinishing cloth that had gotten a bit worn, so new garments could be sewn from it. Imagine today getting excited because your aunt died and left you 4 pairs of jeans. But, in the medieval period, that would have been a truly great score of an inheritance. First, I just want to say great comment. I had no idea this was a thing. Second, I'm dyslexic and read cutting off worn out buttonholes as cutting off worn out buttholes at first. So not only was it informative, it made me giggle. Never traveling more than a few miles outside of your village or town. Wearing cloaks. I don't understand why cloaks are amazing. We should bring cloaks back. I have an unproven theory that certain garments like cloaks, greatcoats, and trench coats have fallen out of popularity simply because they are a pain in the butt while driving a car. I think it's because they are inefficient and our society values efficiency. They are yards and yards of cloth, which makes them heavy and kind of expensive. If you're getting a good quality one, they get caught on things and get dirty far more easily than, say, wearing a coat and a hat. In addition, our society likes seeing people's body shape and lines. Cloaks obscure body shape, meaning that they look less attractive to people in general. Trench coats fell out of fashion because of that weird kid in everyone's middle school. Edit. Yes, Columbine. I didn't mention it because I wasn't alive then, and trench coats were weird in my middle school even without kids thinking about Columbine. Also, it makes my joke less funny to mention it, not more funny. Carrying a sword. More like not having enough money to be able to afford a sword. A decent sword cost several months' wages for the average man. A knife or dagger would be carried by everyone though, but those were tools, not really weapons.